Hello, everybody. Welcome back for our third episode of Contemplative Technology. This is a monthly show that we're doing in the Buddhist Geeks community, and we're super stoked today. We have back with us Amber Case. Amber, it's so awesome to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, so awesome to chat with you again. And for those of the folks who are watching this that followed Buddhist Geeks, you spoke at the second Buddhist Geeks conference and talked about meditation and being a modern cyborg and how those things kind of meld together. And since then, lots happened. Your company, your startup, which you were running with a small team, you guys sort of became part of a larger company called Esri, which you said is like the biggest company you've never heard of.
Yeah. It's in a way, if you have a degree in geography or you work in government in mapping and protecting people from forest fires, or planning a city, or planning for where to put a building in to keep it out of a flood zone, that's the type of software that you use. If you order a fridge or a package via FedEx, Esri Technology is powering the ability to get that package to you and schedule that time with trucks. And a lot of this stuff, it has been built in 1969 on a mainframe computer, and some of that is still running today. Actually, quite a bit of it is still running today. It was founded by a 25-year-old, he and his wife. They took landscape architecture and they started to digitize it. So landscape design, landscape architecture, and then they started some professional services around that, and then they started some data modeling. And there's this thing that they do called spatial analysis, where you can basically predict the future and determine what you're going to do based on what the future looks like. So, for example, the most impressive thing that I found happen with that is Honolulu wanted to see if they should put public transit in their city. And I think it costs like $20 million to do this. So they're like, oh, okay, that's a really big cost. Should we do it? So they made two maps. They made a map with public transit, and then they used a 3D engine to change how the transit would affect the growth of the city, and they went forward like 20 years in time. And then they calculated out like what would happen with suburban sprawl and crime, and then they did that without the public transit system. And they found that they would end up saving $30 million over the next 20 years if they put the public transit system in, because there wouldn't be lots of crime and suburban sprawl and food deserts. And so they were able to make decisions by using this modeling method. So a lot of that is like it's like a geographer's wet dream. I mean, this is like third grade geography class on steroids. So when we found this company, you don't usually run into it unless you need to solve a specific problem like this. I was kind of like, it was like love at first sight. It's like, wow, this is such a strange company. It's completely privately owned. They don't have any stock, so people are just working there because they're nerds. It's like, oh, I felt at home. So we basically merged, but we're continuing on doing the same thing that we did before. It's just that we have support of people who really get it. And we think of them as just really intelligent investors who we don't have to drive it. We don't have to create a giant sales and marketing organization or get the 10-year long contracts that they already have. We can just add our product onto it. So it's like a shortcut. We shortcutted the whole thing. And right now we're working on this real life game of Pac-Man, basically using the technology as a demo of what we built. And we're going to debut it at WearCamp Portland this weekend, and basically the city streets get turned into a Pac-Man map, and you run around and collect dots on your mobile phone, and all the mobile phones in the game subscribe to each other, and when you go through a little geofence, a virtual geofence that you can only see on your phone, then it changes color, and so you can see all the different dots in real life with the people change color, and whoever gets the most territory wins. So we built it 2 years ago when GPS in phones was really bad and the performance was awful. It worked, and we've also played it with quadricopters, where we strapped phones onto the quadricopters and had them battle. But now GPS is reasonable enough that we can remake the game, so we're remaking it to test our new servers and our new platform. So yeah.
Cool. When can we get it, Amber? When can we go play Pac-Man?
when it's done.
Okay.
We have kind of a release thing of, well, let's see if it works, and then we'll release it, and that way we don't have some weird date that we can't accomplish. It's pretty ridiculous technology. It's not supposed to. You're not supposed to be able to do this, basically. So, well, first we'll do some sample games, and then we'll release it, and there'll be like a whole map editor and things you can do with it.
Sweet.
The old game, there were a lot of people in Sweden who liked playing it, so we'd wake up, maybe we had insomnia. And, oh, look, there's a game being played in Sweden. Cool, I can watch. So.
That's really cool. That's really cool to see that. Nice. So, we were thinking it'd be really fun to kind of explore with you and talk about some of the trends in technology that are kind of emerging right before our eyes, both literally and figuratively, and things like Google Glass, which now is being, of course, talked about a tremendous amount, and there are, many people now who have the sort of, is it the Explorer edition? The sort of edition where people can kind of check it out, so sort of super early adopters.
Yeah.
And then also, there's, the new, was it Samsung that came out with a new smartwatch recently?
Yeah. Although the Pebble is much better.
Okay, sweet. So there's smartwatches.
Nice. You have the Pebble.
I have the Pebble, and I like the Up. It's the most calm technology out there. It's the design is the best, and it doesn't get in your way. But yeah, there's a bunch of these things coming out, and I think what keeps happening is over the past 30, 40 years, there have been so many prototypes of this, and the prototypes, of course, have cost $1 to $2 million to build, or the device itself would cost $40,000. They're stuck in research organizations. They're stuck at Xerox PARC. Yep. The devices, the chips, really when fancy mobile phones with all these different chips in them came out and got to a low enough price. Now, finally, we can Frankenstein them all and put them together into something new. And so it really opens up the landscape for people to start to experiment. We are seeing exactly what we saw before again and again. Mobile health was a giant thing in the 2000s and in the 1990s and in the 1980s, and there are so many research papers about it. Quantified self, Steve Mann calls surveillance, that you're taking the data out, making what was formerly invisible visible, and watching over your own self. There's also the idea of calling it like big mother or little brother, or some of these ways of having someone who isn't necessarily around you. I think the excitement of quantified self is something that's been, it basically fills a hole in culture that we've had. We have this generation for maybe the last 30 years that when you grew up, you didn't necessarily make all the things that you wore, and you didn't necessarily reuse things over time, and you didn't necessarily, if you were going to shave your face or your legs, you wouldn't use a straight razor with shaving cream. You just get disposable everything. So you're getting all of this off-the-shelf stuff that you're throwing away. It's all disposable culture. And I think, the parents would spend a little bit more time with their kids and say, hey, here's a thing that you should be doing. There's a reason why we are polite in this way. There's a reason why we take our hat off before we go inside. There's a reason, people were pretty well dressed even if they were quite poor. And we don't have a lot of that anymore. We don't have a lot of tradition and culture. So quantified self comes in and it says, hey, this is something, that your mother or father might tell you to do. It's, suddenly we find ourselves depressed, and as a society, it's becoming a really big issue. We find ourselves compulsive and repetitive. We find ourselves doing, cyber loafing or munching on digital junk food all the time, not understanding what meaning is, not necessarily having a meaningful job like the boomer generation, where you had a job your entire life and a career, and you could raise a family, and you could have 2 cars, you could have a nice standard of living, and you had a retirement. There's this extreme notion of, what am I going to do? Am I really that special? Probably not. I need to fill my time with something. There's a lot of chaos going on and a lot of uncertainty. So at least with quantified self, it's, okay, I gained 5 months, I gained 5 pounds this month. Why? I'm depressed X amount of time. oh, it's because I didn't get this much sleep the night before. So right now, all the quantified self technology, it kind of gives you silos. It's like, well, this will give you sleep and your steps, but it doesn't give me food and depression. Or I really need to be able to have something that talks with each other. Again and again, we've had all these amazing things. They all speak in different languages. I think it was like the Great Tower of Babel issue, where if we have something that speaks with each other, which is the great problem that we've run into that was solved at Park Research, it was the devices that are different languages need to be able to speak to each other, because then we have the insights, right? Then we know that this causes this, and this causes that, and that causes that. But right now we can just see that, oh, I did a lot of steps today. That's great. It doesn't holistically put them together. And I did think, like in 2006 when we had all the RSS feeds, and especially when Twitter came out, that Twitter would be the thing that connected the Internet of Things. That through Twitter you could give anything an RSS feed, and anybody could subscribe to that RSS feed. Whether it was somebody attaching a sensor to a tree, and when you hugged the tree it would tweet, or any of these cows and milk. You could make an entire system, but now it's just a media platform. So I feel like we lost that, and we have to wait for the next generation, because even though we made a lot of startups with data, the business model for that and the business model for APIs is just not there. And so, right, like with online grocery stores in the bubble, we didn't see the business model for them show up until more people were on the web. In the next generation of technology, we'll have a much larger amount of nerds. We have this low nerdification of everybody. So when that happens, we'll be able to find those business models. So we have to wait another, I don't know how long it's going to take, maybe 3 to 5 years. Then we can have those really cool insights, maybe. But also, so right now those insights can be made by surveillance systems from above, which is terrifying to everybody. But no one's doing it for themselves quite well yet. Because it's democratized. And that's why it's scary.
Okay, interesting. Okay, you just jumped right into the deep end here, so let's. Which is great. Which is great. I mean, what you're saying, a lot of what you're saying reminds me of the conversation we had with Chris Dancy last month, and we were sort of to talk about some of the systems that are coming online, things like IFT and Zapier that are sort of trying to program the web in a certain way and connect things, although they clearly have a lot of limitations, and we'll talk about that, because our contemplative tech experiment for the month was actually to set up one of these web automations, or a couple of them, and see what they were like. So we're going to report on our experience of that later. But so taking a step back, there's the hardware, and then you said, it sounds like there's like a kind of silo in a certain way of the data that's kind of generated from these different things. You got the up band, in this hand, and you got the, the Pebble, and you've got Google Glass, and all of these things in some ways are a little sort of siloed off from each other. Like the data's kind of doing its own thing over here. Yeah,
it's basically like, okay, I've got Glass, that's fantastic, but if I want to post that to Facebook or any other app, I have to wait for a third-party application provider to do a partnership with Google Glass to get their stuff on the app. That is ridiculous. It should just be a normal format where I can say, I took a picture with Glass. Yeah, you can tag it with Glass for me, that's fine, but it needs to be able to go to any network.
And why? Oh, sorry. Why is that, Amber? I mean, is it the business model, that there's not an existing business model, or why aren't they doing that?
It's when you get to a company of a certain size, you have fear that if things are open, you lose revenue, I guess. The thing is, the more open you are, the more opportunity that you have. The more interoperable you are, the more you own of the web, right?
Right.
So if on Facebook, if I had a blog, and I wrote a post on my blog, and it automatically went to my blog, but also syndicated out to Facebook, and someone wrote a comment on that blog, and that comment showed up on Facebook, but also came back to my blog, Facebook would not only have just the Facebook property, it would have my blog as well. I wouldn't have to go to Facebook at all, but I would be interacting with Facebook anyway, right? But the problem is that Facebook isn't getting the view from me and the ad revenue from me showing up in Facebook.
Right.
So they're
incentivized.
They're very incentivized because their business model is, if it's free, you're the product and there's advertising. But I think there's an even, I mean, and the advertising is your data gets turned into ads,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I think there's an even more nuanced one where that hasn't really been determined yet. You know, when the web came online, you could change your identity at any time. You could make up your own identity. You owned your data. You built your experience. And we don't really have that anymore. I'll probably be giving a speech pretty soon called What Happened in 2003, which is all about the RSS and Atom wars. Everyone was setting up their own blogs. WordPress was rampant. All these, TypePad and a lot of other things were there. People were blogging, owning their own content and data, making all these plugins. It was amazing, and everybody knew more or less, even if they couldn't set up a server, more or less how to get something done on the web.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they didn't install WordPress on their own server, they could use WordPress.org and have some plugins, right? So WordPress was very interoperable, and it worked with many other systems. And then a bunch of really intelligent people fought on some news groups about which is better, RSS or Atom. And by that time, social networks started showing up that said, well, instead of having this feed reader and RSS feeds, we're just going to put it all together. And so you can just post here, and you can see people, and everyone's here, and you don't have to go to blogs anymore. And people stopped going to blogs as much, unless they were pointed to by like Hacker News and Dig or something like that. And then they started just putting up profiles. So we had this great loss of a whole generation of people that would have made their own blogs. They just joined a social network. We got many more people online because of it, which is great. But now, if a website gets rid of its data or changes ownership or decides to change its user interface, the users have no control over that. And it's really, really tough on people because they often think in terms of a year, and they don't understand that things can change very rapidly on the web. So owning it on your own site is technically the way to go in theory. The same with your data. So all of my outbound data should go to my own site, and I should be able to allow access to that data by another third party that can make sense of that data, if I want to, or my doctor. But there needs to be more layers of authentication and permissions, which are the boring things on the web that no one wants to build, right? But it's really important, or else you have this great amount of data that is stored outside of yourself. That's strange. To quote something from the book Feed, it's like carrying your lungs outside of you in a suitcase, and opening the suitcase every time you need to breathe. Why would you do that? This is part of you, so you need to have it centralized around you, right? So there's a lot of that going on, and when I use Glass, I can't get a lot of the data back into my own site. I have to get it into Google+. Now, Google+ has a lot of great tools. I mean, Hangouts are amazing, but I don't have control over that once it's out there, and I really have to work to get it into any other system. So now I have it automatically go to Dropbox, which backs up to a server that I own, which backs up to Flickr, which backs up to a copy of Flickr that I own. It's really not feasible for a general person who doesn't have a lot of time to go through something like that. So fundamentally, I really like the hacks that people have done. Yes, they're very ugly, right? Like this is a MyView goggles that's been hacked in half. And you see, it's taped on.
Looks like Terminator.
It's Terminator style, yeah. And then if you wanted to make augmented reality, you could put a camera on this side, a processing loop around the back of the head, and then you'd input the filtered reality into this side, which is what Steve Bann and Thad Starner would do, which Google Glass isn't even augmented reality. It's just a layer on top of reality. And it's very elegant, and it's very nice, and it's great to be able to take pictures that quickly. But I'm not able to do something like look at a billboard, cancel it out, and put my own text on it. That's what I want to be able to do, right? The whole point of the original wearable computing and augmented reality was to empower the user, not disempower others, or I mean, yes, it scared people, but it was to say I'm in something like a forest fire, and I share my location through my device, and I also share what it looks like. And just that pinpoint of data can be shared with the news, and it can be used to get somebody to pick me up in a helicopter. Or if there's a human rights violation, I can film that, right at the tap of a button. It's taking what was formerly from above, the surveillance from above, this surveillance to below, the surveillance to look from below. And that's really empowering, The problem with somebody like Google making it is that Google is surveillant, and so it's giving you a surveillant technology from a surveillant company, and
Hmm.
it's owning your data. So there's kind of an issue there, and that's why a lot of people home build their devices by taking off the shelf tools and hacking them. This is the unhacked version, by the way. It's just a video player for your eyes.
Hmm.
So there's this conundrum that people are having, and the other thing that people are having about it is that when feature phones came out, it wasn't really a big deal. Some etiquette was figured out, right? Don't talk in a restaurant. People still do. Keep quiet, leave. It's basically like cell phones are the new cigarettes. Go outside to use it. Like, don't smoke in here. Don't have anything to do. Light up a cigarette. Be on your cell phone, right? No big deal. So the problem is that all of these devices proliferated, right? And it was pretty normal. And then some of them got camera phones. But because everyone had feature phones and only some of them had camera phones, it wasn't as scary as camera phones coming out. Cameras fully baked in. And so you had all these articles in 2000, 2001, or whatever. Oh no, they have cameras. Oh, what happens if I go into the men's room and there's somebody with a camera phone? Are they taking pictures of me? No, of course not. And as you know, someone with a camera phone doesn't take pictures of everyone. The
Yeah.
same thing is happening with Google Glass. The articles are exactly the same. Oh no, are you taking pictures of me? Of course not. I don't think you're interesting. I don't even think my own self is that interesting to take pictures. It's boring. Like, what am I going to take pictures of? The whiteboard so that I can remember, so I can send it to my email account. Or a concert, maybe. The same things I would take pictures of with my regular phone, except it's an even crappier phone on Google Glass because it's new. And what am I going to do? Well, I'll share it with somebody because they can't be there in the moment with me. I'm not taking pictures of you as you walk down the street, and I'm definitely not recording hours of mundane video with the intent of stalking you, right? But because it's not evenly distributed and not everybody has it, it causes tremendous fear in people. So I've developed a series of politeness measures. So one is, let's say this is Google Glass, because I didn't even bring my Google Glass today. It's exhausting to wear because you get the same questions over and over again, and you're basically backtracking the steps that Google didn't explain. Didn't fully explain their product. People are terrified. They don't have a lot of information about it, and people don't know how it works. So you're basically explaining. So let's say this is Google Glass, and I walk into a restaurant. Well, what I do is I just put it up on my head like a headband, and then it's totally okay. People aren't terrified. It
Yeah.
looks just like a headband, and they might look at it a little bit, and then after I've talked with them, and I know about them, and I can put it on if I think it's okay. But I think that's the polite thing to do. There's going to be these politeness measures. It's like I don't have my phone out while I'm eating like this. That's rude, right? So I put it in my pocket, or I put it out on the table if I'm with a lot of extroverted technology people. But the key is that there aren't any new rules for this generation,
Yeah.
and because it's not equally distributed, it is a power object. On one hand, it's a status object. On the other hand, it's a fearful object because it's not understood. And so for everybody who comes up to me, and that's like 95% of people, oh my gosh, it's Google Glass, can I try it on? Da, da, da. There are some people who run away and like turn their heads, and I don't even get to see that they're terrified of the device or interact with them. And that's the thing that bugs me. They're so scared that they won't even talk to you about it because you're aiming a camera at them, and they're fearful that you're streaming everything that they're doing to the internet. Not that anybody cares. So there's a lot to go through because Google had a camera on the front of the glass first, instead of just having a readable device. It caused even more fear. But if everybody started wearing this on their head and then they introduced a camera, I think it would be a little bit easier for them. And I have no idea whether people will adopt this. It's very, very...
I was curious to ask you, Amber. I mean, in terms of your experience, is Google Glass an enhanced experience, as opposed to a phone? I know many of us are constantly reaching for our phones or checking out our phones, and it seems like you have a screen right there. Can you explain a little bit the experience and how it's enhanced and how maybe it's not better?
Yeah, I love it. I have a problem with being very addicted to my phone, and when I use Glass, I just keep my phone in my pocket. I don't need to look at it anymore. I don't need to look at it and get sucked into it. Glass is not something, well, I haven't turned on any of the features where you actually get all this data. I just have the ones where oh, I need to take a picture. Okay, I'm going to take a picture. Um, and I need driving directions, so I'm going to get driving directions. I don't have to look at my phone. And glass will pop up the next turn and speak into your ear when you need to make a turn. So on a bike, it's really safe and a relief. You know, in a car, it's great because you can play music and talk to everybody in the car with you, and they don't hear any of the driving directions. And you're the one with this like amazing power of being able to find anything. Google searching is really nice. Taking video is really fun when you're in a, like we had this giant bouncy ball and we're throwing it around the room, so I took a video of that. That was really cool. I was at an Anamanaguchi conference and I couldn't, or concert, and I couldn't share it with people, so I took a video through Google Glass, and it was just really great because my friend who couldn't be there, I got to send it to him, and it was neat. You know, that was the right type of concert for it, of course, because it's full of nerds, but it feels relaxing. Also, I can tell the time really easily by tapping this. I love being able to tell the time so quickly that way. It's neat, and the weather, and I love it. The only problem is that people's perception of it is so excited that I get overwhelmed and cranky because I'm not naturally extrovert, and I don't, every interaction that I have every day is draining, and unless, I'm up on stage, that's actually, I feel like that's an efficient form of communication because you're communicating to many at once, here again. But it is so exhausting. I had two of them. I gave one to somebody because I thought they would make more use of it than I did, because I can't wear mine as much anymore. I really like the idea of building apps for it, like a car-to-go. You click, you see the car-to-goes nearby, you select one, and then you reserve, all from your glass. I mean, how it's just so elegant and beautiful. Too bad it causes extreme fear in people, and they haven't sent out enough of them yet. So once that happens, that would be better. The farther away I go with them, like if I go to some really random bar in the middle of like rural Massachusetts, like a sports bar, people love it. Like the less they know about it, the more they love it. The more they know about it, the more terrified they are. And then if they completely know about it and have actually worn it, then they're not terrified at all. And I think there's just the assumption that it's recording all the time, which I don't know. I think a lot of journalists have run away with it. And unfortunately, it's distorted the view. So it's, yeah.
One of the things that I see sort of reflected in various places and from various people is this idea that things like glass are sort of taking some of the worst kind of challenges and problems, with smartphones, which have to do a lot with kind of being perpetually sort of paying attention or distracted by them, the sense of my attention being very fragmented. Yeah. And that somehow glass, because it's even closer to you, and it's always on, that it's more accessible, that it's somehow taking those same problems and just amplifying them. And of course, glass is making the claim that it's the opposite. And now you're in a good position, and it seems like you're saying it's not the case that it amplifies the distraction. That maybe Google's right, that it actually is a kind of calm technology.
Well, yes. I just wish they would cite Mark Weiser when they say calm technology, because he's the one who came up with the term, and they have, during keynotes, basically said what he said and not given him credit, and that always makes me mad. It's like, if Glass told the whole history of wearable computing as a story and said, we're the next generation, we're democratizing this, we're bringing it to everyone and giving them this tremendous superpower, I think it would be a lot more compelling because people would get the story behind it. Because they just, said, hey, we're Google Glass and we're totally new, which they're not, I think it alienated a lot of people. They said, oh, wow, what is Google doing? And yes, it's very calm. It, by default, is off, actually, all the time, unless you tap it and turn it on. So it's not even there most of the time, unless you want to click the screen, click the side of the glass. And I really like that. That's the nice part. Same with your phone. Your phone isn't on all the time. Your phone goes to sleep until, when you click on it, then it opens up. The problem is when you click on your phone, there's like 500 things to do and stories to read. And on glass, when you tap the side of glass, you get the time, and you get your schedule, and you get things that allow you to act on reality versus just consume reality. Well, I think it's more active than it is consumptive, and I think that's the big difference.
Okay, that's an interesting distinction.
One thing you brought up, Amber, that I think is really interesting, as you were talking about the story of wearable computing, and how glass might be better served to kind of couch it in that context. And I was wondering your insights into what we were talking about earlier in terms of data, and how we all have access to the up bands and the activity monitors and social tracking, that kind of thing. And do you think one of the problems with a lot of these platforms as being siloed and kind of motivated to keep things within their own boundaries and not really open it up is because of a lack of a larger narrative around what this data could do if things could talk together and connect? Or what do you think the next couple of years look like in terms of this unfolding narrative?
Well, it's a good question. I would say that it would go the way that Esri went, ideally. Esri is a very particular company in which they don't have to report to shareholders, so they don't have to expand exponentially every year in order to have their stock go up. They can say, we'll do something for the next 10 years. We'll do a long-term strategy. We'll do it right. Or we'll, some of the stuff is very hard to use, so, well, let's refurbish it. Let's take this, equivalent of a Victorian house and make it shine again, right? They don't build companies like this anymore. So with Esri, you've got tons and tons of data sets, and you have the ability to correlate those data sets with each other using spatial analysis to make a conclusion. And that method, that set of tools, yes, it's very advanced, should be democratized so that everybody can do it. Just using one silo and just having one company and not having a platform for all the companies to put their data in and get something out and having all these analysis tools limits opportunity. The more objects and properties and data can communicate with each other, the more you have this opportunity. So I think the future would be we can do the equivalent of spatial analysis with data for a small data set or a large data set and get these insights out and start to make the present and the future much more streamlined. There are so many inefficiencies in the world and so many inefficiencies in culture. We don't need to have those inefficiencies. And I'm not saying that it needs to be this draconian thing that, now your life is every second monitored and you need to, optimize. I'm talking about optimizing for happiness and health. Like, hey, it looks like you've been sitting crouched over a computer for 10 minutes and you're actually not doing anything. You're just sitting there on Reddit and you feel depressed because you think you're wasting your time. It's because you need to go take a nap. Go take a nap. Okay, you came back refreshed, now you can actually do something. Or guess what? Working 8 hours a day straight is not actually possible. People can only do like 3 or 4 hours tops, and they're sitting there in their office and they're depressed. And that depression is leading to an ulcer, and that ulcer is leading to this, and there's a history of cystic fibrosis in your family. All of these things put together, with you having the ability to act on it is, oh, this is okay, or hey, you're really insecure about this thing, but like 400 other people have it in the world, and here's a meetup for that. It's okay to be yourself. So when you put this together, because in reality we have social networks of people, which is very interesting. But the most interesting social network is when the devices start to social network with each other. That's a whole other thing that people aren't doing. And you should be able to be on any network and interact with any network. You shouldn't have to have your, it's very important to say have your LinkedIn voice and have your Facebook voice, but ideally you should be able to connect across all of those things. So there's this thing called the indie web, which allows you to centralize all that data, again, via yourself. Of course, it's really nerdy right now, so people probably won't do it for another few more years, but it's sure fun to take control back.
Well, that's something that app.net has also tried to kind of play off of. I don't know what your opinions are on them, but
Let's see. Well, I talked to him this weekend, and a lot of the indie web guys are in discussions with him and others. Diaspora and app.net are examples, and this is horrible, of media-based fundraising.
mm-hmm.
Hey, we're all angry that there's a silo of Facebook, so let's go join another silo. That does not solve the problem.
Right.
Neither of those solve the problem. Now, it does allow you to have access to a smaller network of people, which is one of the problems that a large network has, where when you joined Twitter early on and there weren't that many people and you knew everybody and it was really high quality, and now it's kind of gone to seed. App.net and Diaspora are, hey, here's a bunch of people who are curated and who are promising to put in very useful content, and so it feels like that early web or that early social network. The problem that is not solved is that's one problem, and that's easy to solve by just having people pay or making the community small. But if that community gets successful, you're going to have the same spam issue. You're going to have the same low quality issue. So the other thing to do is just have these systems work with each other, because now you have the same thing. So I hope that I really hope that app.net implements web mention and web actions, meaning that I, on my own blog, could write a post and mention somebody on app.net, and they could respond to me, and my post would syndicate to app.net, and they'd see it without me going to app.net, and they from app.net could respond to me, and it would show up on my site. I wouldn't have to ever leave my site, and they would never have to leave app.net. So they get the interface that they like, I get the interface that I like, and both of us get the data.
Right.
I mean, it's this you choose your own interface, you choose your own adventure, you choose how you want to operate with the web, and you don't have the decisions made for you by some interface, right? I feel like somebody designing and redoing an interface on a billion user website is like somebody going into a billion people's houses one night and changing where all the doors and drawers and doorknobs and how everything works and opens, and the clearance of 6 feet, they change it to 5 feet, and you have to duck before you get in because you have to re-explore your house. It's you're basically sharecropping on a website, and you pay a tax, and the tax is complete uncertainty about what the thing is going to look like at any given moment, and the ability to have your account suspended at any point in time. That's terrifying. You build up a 200,000 person fan base for a product on Facebook, and they say, oh, sorry, there's some violation of terms of service, and we're not going to warn you, we'll just take it out. And suddenly your business is gone, right? If you had that on your own website, then you at least would get a warning from your hosting provider that said, hey, someone's attacked your website, and you could talk with them on the phone, and they'll help you get rid of the bug. I mean, at least that's how it's always worked with me, like running my own websites. I get warning, and if somebody wants to search all my data, they can subpoena that, that they're not just taking it because I've signed a contract with somebody,
Right.
There's a lot of. Yeah.
This is really interesting, and going back to something you were saying earlier, Amber. Sort of seeing the way that we can sort of take this data and make it into something useful in terms of, okay, hey, like you've been crunched over the computer doing nothing for the past 10 minutes. That to me is one of the most exciting prospects with all of this stuff. In particular, I've been thinking about the iWatch idea or things like that, where we can just pack in so many advanced sensors to be sort of tracking some of this data in a frictionless way. That I don't have to input all of the data, because that seems to be one of the big hurdles right now, is having to manually collect all of this data and then having to make sense of it on top of that. So I'm really curious, when it comes to sort of quote-unquote contemplative awareness, sort of seeing the way in which, I can develop a more focused attention, seeing the way in which I can develop, states of consciousness like openness, kindness, compassion, these various beautiful, states of mind that lead to really profound insights about, who I am and what my relationship is with the world and other people. really, important and enriching and deeply meaningful kinds of things. I'm really excited about the prospect of some of these technologies enabling that, or even speeding that process up, because we already know a lot about how to do it. That's the beauty of human traditions, and we have a lot of good knowledge already. But the question of how to implement that in terms of some of these things you're talking about, it seems like we're at that kind of emerging edge right now, and it's very exciting. And then the other thing I want to just kind of throw out there is, to me, part of what this implies is that for us as technology users and for us as human beings, it really starts putting the impetus back on us in terms of making certain choices about what kinds of programs we're running and what kinds of things are we wanting to focus on. When I say programs, I mean, what kinds of, do we use the Nike Fuel Band that has the trainer built in that tells us we need to get up and move, or do we use something else, and why? So anyway, these are just some thoughts and questions that I have.
Yeah, I think, all of those are really valid points. One of the things is, if you don't choose your own routine or your own programs, and those programs can be what you think about every day, right? Then they will be chosen for you. You'll just default to Facebook, right? So you have to make an active choice to define your life a certain way. I shared a link in the chat called Low Friction Personal Data Collection by Aaron Parecki. He's very interested in, he's been tracking his location at 5-second intervals for 5 years and using that to make sense of his life. But he has a number of different low-friction personal data collection, and that's really about, well, I'm going to track every day because I have a Nike Fuel Band, and it automatically does it for me, and then it shows me some feedback. Therefore, it's low friction. I'll keep using it. I don't have to charge the battery very often. Same with the up. The up is a little bit different because it's old-fashioned in that you unplug this part and you put it into the audio jack on your phone, and it syncs the data. And it feels like developing analog pictures. Every morning you're developing a picture of your sleep. Yes. And it feels nice, but if you're that type of person, you do that. If you're a different type of person, you use the Nike Plus. But the other thing is that for thousands of years, we've had generations of people studying yoga or meditation, Buddhism, and all of these different things. And that's been pretty stable in other countries. And then in America, with this hodgepodge of people on random traditions, we're all looking for a way to turn off and a way to have peace in a really messy, chaotic world, so that we're, really it's cybernetics. All of this quantified self stuff is the promise of cybernetics in the 40s and 50s. The promise of what cybernetics had for governments, because governments are just a big piece of software. And in some cases, it's a bunch of legacy software and legacy hardware. Like in America, we have legacy telephone poles everywhere, and we have all these legacy systems that were really big, whereas in South Korea, they built from scratch a lot of this stuff, and so they're really fast, and they have fiber everywhere, right? So they're on a newer operating system for their technology infrastructure, right? And we're on an older operating system.
Yeah.
So we have all these systems together, and there's some really old, wise information in systems. But of course, we want that the scientific proof that yes, meditation is useful, and then even then, we don't often have a lot of time for it because technology, in its very needy state, doesn't allow for that. Contemplative time. So we end up justifying it to ourselves, or having a technology that says, hey, you should meditate, or hey, let's attach some EEGs to your brain, and when you're in alpha wave synchrony, play a nice tone, and all you need to do is extend that tone out, and then you'll be doing the equivalent of mental defragmentation,
Right.
But this whole cybernetic movement is, originally it was for, let's apply cybernetics to society, which in reality is what Esri's doing with their spatial analysis. That's cybernetics, basically. Here's a series of, but the idea behind cybernetics is more than that. It's a loop, and that feedback loop tightens the call and response structure so that you get a more optimized, happier, healthier system over time. Our human body works like that. There's lots and lots of feedback loops. So this is basically applying that down to the individual level. You become your own cybernetic feedback loop processor, where you have a human in the loop and you have some technology in the loop, and you, as the end subject, determines whether to change your life or not based on that. Right? Like my favorite was the Harvard Happiness Project. It was really obnoxious. for 3 months, I got 3 survey questions a day, three links on my phone that were sent to me 3 times a day. It was a 20-minute survey or something ridiculously long.
Wow.
Who are you with? It probably wasn't 20 minutes. It felt like 20 minutes. It probably was 5 minutes. Yeah, who are you with? What are you doing? What did you just do? Da 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 da. All this like really granular data, maybe 20, 30 questions. I filled it out tediously 3 times a day for 3 months. And at the end, I got these bar graphs. And it said, when you're at work, you are depressed and you're unhappy. And I was at this old job that I was at that time. And I looked at the graphs. And I remember every time I went to parties and every time somebody said, how's your job going? I would tell them, oh, I love it. It's the best job ever. But when I was physically at the job, I reported feeling really bad. So I was basically lying to myself and the world on a daily basis. And I realized that when I was working on this little side project called geology, I was the happiest and I was self-actualized. And when I was hanging out with this guy named Aaron Parecki, I was happy and self-actualized. So I said, well, according to this data, I need to quit my job. And I also need to move.
Mm-hmm.
So I quit my job and moved and changed a lot about my life to just optimize happiness. There's a podcast called A Programmatic Approach to Perfect Happiness. It's a science fiction podcast. It's about this robot. Somebody falls in love with a robot, and the robot maintains a state of happiness with its spouse by maintaining a cybernetic feedback loop to make sure to feed them at the right time, so that very sim-like you get that bar, above your head up to green or gold or whatever it is. Which is why I really like The Sims. The Sims is one of those systems where it was made specifically by Will Wright for therapy. His house burned down, and so he made a simulation game in which your house could burn down so that he could relive it again and again and help himself get over that issue. And in other cases, all of human functions and actions and needs are boiled down into some very simple variables. You've got like 10 variables. Whether the room is clean or not, whether you're hungry, whether you need to like pee, whether you don't have enough socialization, and whether the objects in your home are quality or not, whether you have a job, whether you have money. And then when you look at it, you're like, well, humans are just a series of sensors and a series of programs, low-level programs that require resources and need certain things, and all the things that we do are really a result of that. So if I'm angry, it probably means that I didn't eat enough that morning. Unfortunately, I don't have a cool Sims bar in front of me that tells me that I need to eat. I want something like that. And furthermore, when you look at a sim house and you run a simulation of people and maybe somebody similar to you and similar to the person that you live with, you can see that top-down isometric architect perspective where you have the godlike view and you're looking and you're running something at 40, 50 times as fast as regular life. You could start to see these trends that on a daily basis you wouldn't be able to see by living at ground level in real time. And just seeing those patterns visually, I modeled my place, and Aaron and I were where we lived, and ran it fast speed, and put all the same furniture and everything in there in the Sims. Ran it, found out that we'd both get home from work and need to pee, but there was one bathroom, and we both had to get around this chair to get there because the chair was in the wrong place. And so we start talking, but we both needed to pee, so we kind of got mad at each other, and the friendship points went down a little bit because they're stupid chairs. Okay, fine. So I'll move the chair in The Sims and see what happens. Oh, wow, everybody is on average much happier, optimized for everything else. Okay, well, I'm going to go take this chair in real life and move it. Oh, yay, we're a lot happier, and I don't know why. Well, I knew why, but, really simple stuff like that. Sometimes people say, oh my gosh, that's so insane, reducing things to variables. Like, don't you want to have the serendipity in your life? And yes, of course, that's why I turn off all my technology and go to a playground and play. I don't want that all the time. But for the times in my life that are going to be repeatable actions that I'm going to have happen again and again, getting home from work, going to work, being at work, I want to optimize those for happiness as much as possible because they're unavoidable situations. Otherwise, I could edit them out of my life by going into the woods, which I'd have a social issue because I need people around. People are like, I'm going to go live in the woods. You need a community. You're going to get severely depressed. Just be really careful. Run a sim first. So I do like using that technology in that way because you get these funny insights about yourself that you might not be able to have. Now, some people call it like middle class navel gazing, right? But honestly, like the ability to be able to improve yourself as a person so that you're nicer to people improves the world a bit, I think.
Yeah.
Versus maybe you're in a position of power and you're a real jerk, but you don't know why, and you don't have a objective system there to tell you that, because the more powerful people become, the less somebody's going to tell you, hey, you're a real jerk. You should stop doing that.
Well, and not to mention that the quantification doesn't stop at the self. If this data is talking, then potentially we can actually see how our actions and our behaviors impact places that are beyond our sort of current sort of environment. We could actually see, oh, buying these things or doing or driving or flying or any of the actions we take. Like if the data is actually starts to get more connected, we could actually see the ways in which that has an impact on the amount of carbon that's outputted into the into the environment, or see the way in which that creates income or wealth in a certain area in sub-Saharan Africa, or see the way that it actually hurts people in some area. I mean, that to me is also quite exciting, the sort of interdependence aspect that could get illuminated by the interconnection of data. So that's how I would counter the navel gazing argument.
Well,
Is,
it's also cool to see that my wife is actually happier because I had a decent breakfast and got a good amount of sleep.
Yes, that's very important. I have to eat in the morning, or I get angry, and I unfortunately have to eat at the same time every day. I have to eat at 5 p.m. or I get insane. Oh, it's just because I'm hungry, or I get in this weird state where I'm kind of doom oriented. Oh, everything is doomed. We can't do anything. Doom. It has nothing to do with that. It's just I haven't eaten. Wow, that's really silly. So,
yeah.
But I mean, that's the thing. Like, can you imagine like somebody who's just stuck on like an off cycle of they didn't eat properly, and then because of that they didn't sleep, and they're just really mean? Like, I've been noticing that it's like some people at Esri, there's this one guy and he was so overstressed, and it was really upsetting to watch. And I looked at him and he had this tiny office and people were just interrupting him all day long. And he basically was, an executive, and I said to his boss, I said, he needs a larger office and then he'll be okay. Because he was the no guy. He would just say no to everybody. I was like, well, there's a reason why, he has no bandwidth to do anything. So he got a larger office, and now this guy's like really easy to work with. I was like, oh, it's the room meter in The Sims. Let's optimize for this because this guy's a bottleneck. So sometimes doing like interface restructuring on a system, and that you just realize that everything, especially a large company, is an ecosystem, and you need to optimize for the health of that system, or really bad things can happen. You can have a company that has the equivalent of cancer. It's got a bunch of people who, there's too many of them, and they're all doing the same thing, and they're not allocated correctly, and so they're the equivalent of cancer cells. They multiply, but they don't do anything, and it wastes company resources. Esri is pretty small for what it does. Like, it does the work of probably a 30,000 person company with 3,000 people. So even though at every company you're going to have weird pockets of non-operation, it's pretty streamlined because it's so private, and often when a company's public and you get more money at it, hire. You don't need to. I do like the most more efficient systems. Then you have to ask, if a system is so efficient and we can replace a system of 400 people with 10, what happens to those 400 people?
Right.
The whole point of society modernizing itself is so that people work less, right? We're supposed to be down to a 4-hour workday. Well, a whole heck of a lot of people are only working 4 hours a day these days. They're just at work, unfortunately. They're not being efficient. People should be paid for efficiency. So if there's a guy who does 1 day of work a month, that is the equivalent of 1 month of work for somebody else, pay them for that month of work. I mean, that just sounds super counterintuitive and scary, but yeah, shortcuts and efficiency and compressing systems make more sense than sitting there day after day. I mean, I would always automate whatever I needed to do at my job at the last few companies I worked at, and I'd say, okay, I'm done with my job, and I'd get laid off. They'd be like, well, we don't have anything more for you to do. I'm like, upgrade me, like give me more stuff to do. I want to automate it, I
Mm.
solved the problems in the company. I digitized all your forms.
Yeah, yeah. This is an interesting thing because it has broader socioeconomic repercussions. Like I just was reading a really great academic article on 50% of current U.S. jobs over the next couple decades look like they're going to be computerized based on certain kinds of research about how what type of jobs what sort of problems within that job could be, eventually done with artificial intelligence, narrow AI, or done with, with certain types of things. And it's like, okay, we're looking at, the mass, disappearance of huge sectors of our economy, and we've got to figure out a different model, a different mindset to approach this whole thing. We're stuck. As Douglas Rushkoff would say, we're stuck with these like archaic, economic models, and we're not trying to disrupt those. We're just trying to like make a new technology that'll get venture capital and make us a bunch of money. And I think that's one of the things I hope with contemplative technology we can explore is how do we design and use technologies in a way that that are really looking at some of these deeper needs of human beings and deeper meanings, and where we're actually able to question our assumptions about how reality actually is, because that's at the core of the contemplative process, is the willingness to do that and a willingness to die to our assumptions, which we tend to also identify with. We think they're me, we think they're the subject, but when we make them an object, when we quantify them, then suddenly there's room for a new subject to emerge that's bigger and more interesting and upgraded, as you put it.
Yeah.
And that to me is very excited, to see the who we are constantly being objectified and made into an object, and then something new emerging. So I really appreciate everything you've shared here, and I want to be kind of cognizant of the time and wrap up soon. But any last thoughts from either of you guys?
Well, I had one question, kind of on that note, Vince, for Amber, and one of the, Vince and I have been diving into this quantification and tracking our activity and exporting that data. And one of the things that I don't really see, I see a lot of things that that have to do with physical, movement or sleep or kind of external data sets, but I haven't seen very many kind of on the internal side or quantifying subjective experience. And so kind of dovetailing with what Vince was saying, have you seen any apps or technologies that are allowing people to quantify the subjective experience and kind of see that over time, maybe as some things for the viewers to try out, and definitely us too?
Sure. The Harvard Happiness Project was the most subjective of all the studies. It had no external quantifiable data in it at all. It was all qualitative, really. How are you feeling in the situation? Who are you with? It was very manual. There's a project by Brendan Novak called eMoome, EEMOOME.com. There have been a giant history of emotion tracking projects. How are you feeling this moment? The key for those is that you have to input all the time, right? So it'd be nice just to have a wrist bracelet that you could tap a few times. Like I'm going to tap like Morse code, simple. I'm going to tap twice if I'm angry. I'm going to squeeze it really tight if I'm really angry. I'm going to just lightly tap. So you could have this kind of haptic. I think the haptic input would make sense for those. Otherwise, you're opening up your phone and you're pressing the smiley face or the sad face.
Right.
It's reasonable. That's okay. People used to report their emotion on LiveJournal, right? They had happy faces and sad faces. I don't think writing an essay is going to be helpful. There's 750 words, which is a really nice project where you type 750 words a day, and then it does some little analysis to see what you write about, what you're worried about, which is kind of cool. Again, with the qualitative stuff, it's harder to get information out like that. Like food tracking. Oh my gosh.
No, it's hard.
You need a POS. You need to be a waitress or waiter with, the tap, 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 tap. I got this type of item. You didn't have like a persistent screen where you can memorize the buttons, or a certain category of food. Or, if you're using a credit card, it should automatically figure out what it was at what location and add it into the system, and then you're only tracking when you made your own dinner, which you probably forget to do, because what's the first thing you think about when you're hungry? Oh, I'm going to go eat some food. Maybe you take a picture of it, only if the food is really nice. Maybe you take a picture of it all the time, which stop doing that. That's really obnoxious. Amateur food is really gross. And not like professional food stuff, and no one wants to see what you eat, especially when they're not hungry. So really, it's hard at that point in time to really take that take that data. So I think there should be some more, but they should be really, really simple and make use of different sensors and different methods, and maybe some Morse code, maybe some haptics, maybe some squeezing, the stress balls, like or a punching bag that you punch when you're angry, and say, oh look, you weren't angry for 6 hours, congratulations. But yeah, there's lots of research papers. If you look in JSTOR and look at some academic papers, there's a ton on emotion, and there's a ton on this tracking, that tracking for Palm Pre's and Windows Mobile 5.0 or whatever the earlier smartphones were, and even Palm devices, like little tablet devices at Park Research in the 80s. There's a lot of it. It's just that the people that make those things are often not doing it with the right thing in mind. They don't think of the person in the situation needing to record the data. They say, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I could get this data? They don't think of the best user experience test for your mobile app is put somebody in an airport late to catch a flight, and then have them do stuff, like run alongside them and have them try and use your app. And if they can't use your app, redo it, like make it better. It's gonna be that in between space, and it has to work over a really crappy connection. Run your app on a 14 4K modem, while you're running with it, and see if it's good then. And if it's not, then you're doing a bad job. So if I'm loading this complex interface about what I'm feeling, I think that the best app would be, how are you feeling? And it would send you a text message, and then you just respond, and it would analyze it.
Or or a Google Glass app. Okay, Google, I'm upset.
Right, but then you'd be standing there in a meeting, and you'd say, okay, Google, I'm upset. Right? Speaking to electronics. I hate it. Also, when I took Google Glass to other countries, like I said, say okay Glass, but say it with an American accent. So people were saying okay Gloss, and then okay Glass. It's hilarious. Like, so I don't like speaking to a device, because devices only listen to American accents that have a slight Southern twang to them.
It's good for my wife.
Google Glass is prejudice against non-American middle class people. So really, I think with the Google Glass app, you could just tap it a few times, depending, and that way, when you're in a meeting, you could just tap it like you're usually using it, and you could put some data in there. Tap once to take your emotion, then you have a choice of 2 emotions. Done.
Yep.
2 taps for I'm happy, and 1 tap for I'm sad, and 3 taps for I'm pissed off. Or
I like the wide range of what you're experiencing over there, Amber.
I'm angry at an interface or something. I'm mad, or a text message thing. People forget about SMS. SMS works everywhere. Twitter worked really well because it was SMS. I was direct messaging people through the command line. The command line, the IRC channels, the really simple interface works really well under low bandwidth conditions. You can retry and resend anytime. People use SMS constantly as they get near people. It's that last minute technology. You can use all the freaking apps you want about where am I and where are my friends and how do I get to a place. But when you finally get to somebody and nearby, that last mile or that last 3 blocks where you can't find somebody because it's a rainy day and the signs are covered and there's a construction, you default to text message. So why not make an app that defaults to the thing that people use all the time, which is text? It doesn't need to be that high tech. You definitely don't need to spend $120K on development. You don't need to make it shiny. You just need to make it functional. Because Google is a command line. It's text. What do? You type in the command line and you say enter. I'm searching for this. This is my search query. Before Google, everybody's making these three-dimensional zoom in, zoom out interfaces. You can look at the entire web in 3D and zoom into the section that you want to get into. No one used that crap. On a 28K modem? Yeah, right. Like,
Yep.
now you could do it with OpenGL. No, you just want the freaking result. You want to get the result in a number of different ways. You want to get the result on your phone. You want to get it on the web. And there you go. That's the number of different ways is too. Like, it's really simple. You know, why not have a simple app that does that? Oh, but it's really boring, and I could program that in 2 minutes using the Tropo API or Twilio API. Okay, go do it. If you really want it,
Nice.
you don't even need to be a programmer. That's why it's always so silly that people default to the most expensive technology ever. And then you go to Japan and you realize that people didn't really change how their door system worked. They had sliding doors for thousands of years, and then technology came around with photoelectric sensors, and they have a door that you walk up to and opens. Everything's the automatic sliding doors. Oh, look, you don't have to worry about when you're carrying 10 packages, if someone nice around you will open the door for you. You don't have to worry about closing the door behind you. You don't have to worry about squeaky hinges or oiling the hinges. You don't even have to worry about doorknobs. And you can automatically have the door shut down during certain non-work hours. Or you could lock it behind you if you needed to. But like, it's just this very elegant way of modernizing a culture while keeping with tradition. And then you go to a country like America, and suddenly you have to have a two-person process of holding doors open, and I don't know. I just think it's very inefficient. You know, design in Japan and design in Sweden, design in some of these countries we're designing well for 1 million people to go through it. We're not designing for, you know, and it's still nice to have a beautiful, ornate wooden door that enters you into a different space, like a church. You want to keep that because you want to slowly contemplate the building you're going into. A giant stone door, for instance, like, that's amazing. It's a sense of wonder. But for everyday life, man, just have the most efficient thing that has the cheapest technology and just get it done. So many people are overthinking stuff. Just use the lowest tech technology you can to get it done. And if you need a higher tech technology, use that, but only when it's absolutely necessary. And when you're designing something, you know, who was that quote? For, you know, take everything out of it until there's nothing left to take away and get it done. And if the thing that you're releasing isn't immediately embarrassing to you, then you're releasing it too late, and no one's going to use it. You know, so I always tell people this when they're making something. You know, I gave a speech and this guy ended up making the Momodo. He got all inspired. He's like, I'm going to make this thing. And later he made the Momodo. I was like, wow, you designed it really beautifully. It's a tiny little square, and the camera's not right in the middle because he actually did user testing. It's up to the right, and it looks calm. Like, that is the ultimate piece of calm technology. No one is terrified.
Is that like a life logging?
It's a life
camera?
log. Yeah. It's a square, and it literally takes pictures all day, every day. But no one's afraid of it because it doesn't look scary, and it's not on your head. So you get this whole amazing stitched together day out where you can compress what you did in that day and who you talked to. And you get this beautiful look at, oh, I talked to that person for 20 minutes. Wow, I must really like that person. Or, wow, we had a good discussion. You can note it down. Or you could set it through a video call or a processor like Crowdflower that would tell you what the video was about. And you could have a little journal, you know, by humans writing down stuff for you. I don't know. That's the type of stuff that I'm really interested in. It's very small, it's very simple, and it's very well designed. And the Swedes do that very well. And so I'm betting on, you know, again, like for the last 100 years with, you know, Nokia and a lot of these very innovative places, you know, Nokia and like Finland and Sweden and definitely Iceland. Like, all sorts of people are going to Iceland right now to build interfaces and do the next generation of everything. So in terms of the future, you know, it shouldn't terrify you if somebody walks into a room with a Momodo, but it will terrify most people if you walk into a room with glass. I could wear a Momodo all day and no one worries. But I wear a glass and, walking down the street, you know, Momodo looks like a nice little pendant. So there's just, design is the most important thing. And if people understand how to design all the complexity out, then they win. And all the products that we use today and love versus hate and have to use are the ones that are elegant. You know, like Google, you don't notice it anymore. You Google something. That action has been compressed into a very small little part of your life. And the whole point is to get the result back, and not for the computer to know which result you were looking for, but for it to give you a result, 10 results, so you can, as a human, curate that choice. As an executive functioner with a weird brain that's qualitative, take something that's very quantitative, that has done a lot of the work for you, and choose which thing you want it to choose. And that's the perfect symbiosis of humans and machines, where the computer does what it's best at doing, which is getting through a lot of data and compressing it together and presenting a list. And then the human can understand through the qualitative side what they really meant. And that's why automating all the jobs is a bad idea. You need to have humans in the loop to make sure that, for instance, someone can get through a subway system. I can put my phone up and my phone won't register with a ticket, or there's a fold or a crease in my paper ticket, and I can't get through. And if there's a human not there, I can't get to my plane. If all the humans left, there would be these catastrophic system errors. Like the whole movie Brazil is about that. You know, there's a bug that gets into this guy's typewriter, and this one guy gets executed because of it. And there's no one around to understand that it was a bug in the computer. And so somebody dies. You know, this is why humans are really, really important, and they need to work with computers. You can't automate one or the other. It doesn't help. It also feels lonely. Like if I go into a shoe store, I want to have somebody who not is there just paid to be there and look bored, but somebody with an intimate knowledge of shoes and how feet work and how to get the most comfortable shoes out of it that are like awesome, that are going to enhance my life. Or somebody who tailor makes clothing. You know, you can have a tailor and then a computer can reproduce all of what they make. But you need that artisan, that craftsperson, that designer that knows how to make those great experiences. Anyway, end rant.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Amber. This is a lot to chew on and a lot to digest. So thank you for for just sharing some of your thoughts with us. It's great.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for your time.
Great.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Yeah, take care, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.